This is the Meaning Crisis podcast. I'm Dr. Paul Fortunato. I use literature to bridge the gap between spirituality and science, art and neurology, mythos and logos. Since the Enlightenment, our culture has cut us off from story and mythos, but it's precisely by working through these ritualized stories that we can make sense of the world and can flourish and connect with ourselves, with others, and with the world generally. Because I'm a Catholic professor using exclusively secular and non-religious thought, I'm better able to bridge the gap between the spiritual and the scientific.
Paul Fortunato will be with us today. He's a professor at U of H downtown.
Correct.
Literature, Paul?
English literature, yeah.
English literature, and you've been there for how long?
19 years.
19 years. So he's not new to the game. Originally from Chicago? No, California.
New Jersey.
New Jersey?
The other coast.
The above. Clearly I know Paul well. I mean, we go way back.
I used to live in Chicago. I never lived in California.
But you've lived in California, right?
No, I haven't.
Yet.
Not yet. Not yet. I want to.
Well, I'll let Paul take it away, and I'm very excited for this. And then there's going to be an extension of this that might be, it will be a weekend-long event that Paul can talk more about. But yeah, Paul, I'll leave you to it. I'm going to sit over here so I can see.
Okay. So I'm going to tell a story, because this is on how and why you should become a habitual reader of books. And I'm an English professor, and you can think like, well, okay, yeah, you're an English professor. Of course, you want everybody to read books, and but I'm convinced that it's going to crucially make a huge difference in your life and my life, because I'm also working on this myself, even though I teach this stuff. So here's a story to kind of like set a theme about, and I'm going to talk about the brain. And the story is, I'm getting it from this German writer named Paul Marr. And in the story, it's a little short children's story, there's a guy named Conrad who is a little kid, and he's unable to tell stories. And he's unable to sort of think in terms of stories. And this is kind of weird, because like most of us, like we just do it naturally. So all he can do is give facts, figures, like mathematical formulae. He can give you those, but he can't tell a story. And so his mother asks him, "Oh, what did you do yesterday, Conrad?" And he said, "Yesterday I was in school. First we had math, then German, then biology, and then 2 hours of sports. Then I went home and did my homework. Then I spent some time on the computer, and later went to bed." Okay, thanks, Conrad. Like he can give you facts, but he can't like connect them, like cause and effect, or like what's the meaning of them? Just the facts. And so he lacks the inwardness that would allow him to internalize events and weave them into a story. So his little sister says, "Okay, let me see if I can help you, Conrad, here." So she says, "Okay, Conrad, here's what I do when I tell a story. I always begin by saying, 'There once was a mouse.'" Conrad immediately interrupts her. "Shrew, house mouse, or vole? Mice belong to the genus rodents. There are two groups, genuine mice and voles." And so his sister's like, "Whoa." And so he can't get to the story. He can just get to the facts. And so everything kind of disintegrates in fragments. And this is kind of a model, or I'm going to sort of argue that this is a model of what our modern society is moving towards. So we're kind of like broken into facts and fragments, and we can't tell the whole story. We can't experience the whole story. And so then his parents are like, "Okay, we need help here. So we're going to take him to an expert storyteller, and the expert storyteller is named Miss Leisure, and Leisure is a significant name. Like he needs leisure. And so she's this old lady with thick white hair, and she has dark, bushy eyebrows. And she says, "I understand that you're parents have sent you to me so that you can learn how to tell stories. Good. So Conrad comes in, and when he comes to the house, like the house looks like just like a small house, regular house. But when he comes in, it's like this endless corridor. And so she tells him, okay, Conrad, here's a parcel. Take the staircase and take it to my sister upstairs. Okay, so Conrad takes the parcel. He goes up the staircase, which seemed to go on forever. Astonished, he asks, how is this possible? I saw the house from the outside, and it had only one floor. We must be on the 7th by now. So he's like climbing the stairs, and he looks to the side, and the door opens up magically. And a hoarse voice calls out, "Ah, there you are at last. Now home on in and come bin." Whoa, what's going on with the language here? And so he's realizing even the language is kind of weird. This building is weird, the language is weird. Instead of saying come in, she says come bin. And so he pokes his head through the door. He's able to make out an owlish figure. And he asks, who are you? Don't be so purious. Do you want to let me wait forever? The owlish creature retorts. And then Conrad's kind of weirded out. Soon you'll blow downhill. Have a lice trip. Ha ha ha, the voice chuckles. At that moment, Conrad notices the dark room has no floor. So he starts to fall down through this tube, and he tries in vain to find something to hold on to, all the time feeling as though he's being swallowed by some animal. And finally, it spits him out at Miss Leisure's feet. What did you do with the parcel, she asks. I must have lost it along the way, Conrad answers. Miss Leisure puts her hand in her pocket in her dark dress and pulls out another parcel. Conrad could have sworn that it was this very same parcel that she gave him earlier. Here, Miss Leisure says brusquely, please deliver this to my brother downstairs. In the basement? Conrad asks. Nonsense, Miss Leisure says. You'll find him on the ground floor. We're up on the 7th floor, as you know. Now go. So Conrad goes down the stairs this time, and it's hundreds of steps. Hello, he hesitantly calls out, but no one answers. Hello, Mr. Leisure, can you hear me? A door next to Conrad opens, and a coarse voice says, Of course I swear you. I'm not deaf. Quick, come wine. In the dark room, a figure who looks like a beaver and smokes a cigar is there. The beaver creature asks, What are you baiting for? Come on 9. Conrad slowly enters the room. Again, he falls into the dark bowels of the house, and again they spit him out at Miss Leisure's feet. She draws on a thin cigar and says, Let me guess, you failed to deliver the parcel again. Conrad musters the courage to say, No, but anyway, I'm not here to deliver parcels, but to learn how to tell stories. How can I teach a boy who cannot even carry a parcel upstairs how to tell a story? You'd better go home. You are a hopeless case. So she opens the door, and she says, Have a safe journey, Dome, and all the West. And she pushes him out. So he goes home, and his parents are there, and Conrad comes rushing into the house, announcing excitedly, I have to tell you something. You will never believe what happened to me. So now, because the world is unintelligible to him, he can't make sense of it, it's full of mystery, all of a sudden he has a story to tell. And it's not just objective facts and events that resist explanation, and for that very reason, because they kind of have mysterious elements, they require narration. His narrative turn makes Conrad a member of a small narrative community. His mother and father smile at each other. There you go, his mother says. And so he has learned to tell stories. And so why do I tell you this long story, besides the fact that it's kind of cool, is that, as I was saying, I think this can serve as a model for the modern world and the modern mind. And in a lot of ways, which we can get into later, but this is thinking about reading. The the storytelling animal. And this is a long story, but at the time of the Enlightenment, in like the 1500s and 1600s, the West largely decided that we don't need the stories that we used to have as much as we used to need them. Those like Greek and Roman myths, or the Norse myths, or the Christian and Jewish stories, or the Muslim stories. Yeah, they're there, but like we're more focused on science and technology, and these are the things that are going to get us forward in the world. And so I would say over various hundreds of years, we kind of became less dependent, not always in bad ways. I mean, modernity is good. I mean, it's good that we progressed into modernity, but I think we lost something, and we've been losing our connection to story and our capacity to make meaning of stories. And in a certain sense, the modern world, and I would point to like the higher rates of anxiety and mental illness and the fragmented nature of our lives, and it's harder to bond and to connect with other people and to connect with the community, your neighborhood, is falling apart because of that. Because we've been so detached from stories and the capacity to tell stories. And like the kind of loneliness epidemic and so forth. And so I've been talking for a bit there. So let me see, did that make sense before I go on? Any quick questions or thoughts on that? Has anyone heard that story before? No. Isn't that a cool story? I love that story because I've been thinking about the concept of story for years, and I teach English. And because it's hard to get at, like, what's the story? And why do we, like, need to worry about them? We have all these facts, and we have tons of information, and now we have the internet, we've got ChatGPT. Like, we've got, like, a wealth of information, more than we can ever take in. It's like a fire hose of just kind of, like, overwhelming us. And that's another reason why we need stories, in order to kind of parse out and, like, block off things so that we can find the story, find the through line that makes sense of all these things. And so we need, I would submit, to read books. And I have some rules, and I guess maybe I'll just read them first. And they were sort of in the text that Diego sent. And so here they are. I have some rules, and then I have some ideas, which are not rules, but like sort of suggestions. Read daily. Read for pleasure. Slowly grow your ability to attend and to contemplate. And contemplation is sort of the opposite of a lot of distraction and like turning to your phone and like wanting more information. And have deeper conversations by starting a reading group or joining some kind of conversation group, like this is sort of a conversation group. And push yourself to communicate more powerfully, because we don't communicate as well as we used to as well, I think. So those are the rules. And here's some ideas to kind of like flesh them out, because you can tailor these to however you live them. And I know, like, we did a trial run of this 2 months ago with Diego and a couple of other guys. Who else was there? That was Rodolfo and John Villanueva and Felipe. They're not here. And Diego made a good point, and an objection, which is something I'm still wrestling with, which is, okay, I'm a modern working man. I have a really demanding job. I've got a pretty busy social life. And when I get married and have kids, how am I going to have time to read a novel? Like, who has, I might barely have time to, like, think, like, to pull out a book and, like, kick back. I mean, it seems impossible. And I am going to argue that it's possible, but, and you need to do it in a small amount. But it's not a matter of, like, discipline, like I'm going to work out like a Navy SEAL and read like a Navy SEAL. No, it's more like, I love it. It has to be like something that you actually love doing. Otherwise, it doesn't work, in a sense. This is about falling in love with reading again. And because that's how we're going to be able to cultivate the capacity to contemplate. Okay, so other ideas. So something that you love. Read lightly at first and stop after 15 minutes. So if, let's say, you're reading daily, or let's say 5 days a week, doesn't have to be every day, maybe like 5 days a week. I'm reading in the morning. I read my novel for 15 minutes, and I stop. And then the next day, pick it up again, you get your bookmark, read again for another 15 minutes. Maybe you go a little longer, 20 minutes. Stop. And the reason I'm saying read in small amounts, at first especially, but even later on, is you don't want it to become homework. It has to be leisure. Leisure is the basis of culture. Leisure means relaxing, not having to do something. You're doing it because you love it. And so that's a hard thing to do. I mean, we normally have I've got to do this, this, and this. I've got my to-do list. This can't be a to-do list thing. This has to be something that you love. Read early. Just some ideas. This is not necessarily going to work for everybody. Get up 30 minutes early. That's one way of doing it. Do it. Maybe read for 15 minutes before you start working. It's as a way of a lot of people do mindfulness meditation. It's kind of a way of doing some mindfulness meditation before you start working. Other ideas: have a notebook and a pencil. I mean, you can do voice memos too. I mean, I think that's fine. But I think it's good to kind of record some ideas to kind of close the loop. In fact, when you read something, I think a bad way of reading would be to just read it, put it down, and then go to the next book and read it and put it. You need to externalize it and bounce it off somebody else. That's the only way to really complete a reading. And think about when you watch a good movie. You have to want to sit down with your friends and talk about it maybe for hours, and you even talk about it the next day, because it's just so rich. That's the sort of reading and contemplating and conversating that we need to do. And this is just another idea too, which is write. I'm an English professor. I'm encouraging people to write. But if you keep a daily journal and just fill a page a day, put a timer out and say, okay, I'm going to write for 6 minutes. Whatever comes out, and maybe think about what you just read. Oh, this is an interesting story about I think we read part of the Lord of the Rings. Just some ideas, and then you can go off into a tangent. But the point is just to read and to think about what you read. Write and think about it. So those are the rules. Those are some ideas. Now I want to. So actually, let me pause there and see any thoughts or objections. I mean, Diego was kind enough to give me an objection last time. Maybe you got another objection, Diego, or yes.
Yeah, I feel from my personal experience, yes, it needs to be leisure, but at the same time, I mean, I feel I don't know if I'm going to use the virtue word, but good habits require sort of discipline too. So I got into it by, in a way, forcing myself, but now it's okay, I'm missing something every night. So then it becomes leisure, but it is kind of temporarily, I don't really.
Good point. Yeah. I maybe I was exaggerating, but I think there's a certain amount of discipline that goes into this. Certainly the discipline if you want to get up earlier, sort of put it into your schedule. But I just wanted to emphasize that I don't want it to. I mean, you can do any kind of reading you want, but this is. I don't mean I'm a businessman. I need to read all these business books. No, it's not work. This is stuff that's not your work. I mean, do that stuff too, but this is a different type of reading. And let me clarify too, because I think stories. So novels, short stories, biographies, some histories, but page turner type books, books which are a story, not a history book that's oh my gosh, this is so boring. That's not what I'm recommending, because that's work, and you can do that. That's different. And man is the storytelling animal, and I think I don't know if I made the case clearly, but we need to refeed the stories into our brains, because we're getting stories. In fact, this is one of the problems. Where are we getting our stories? from Instagram and from ads and from YouTube videos. And I use YouTube. I don't really use Instagram, but the goal with the book thing, the goal with cultivating contemplation, is the reality of how do I live temperance with my screens. I can't not use my screens. I work with them. And I use Uber. I sort of, at one point I got a dumb phone, and I tried it for a while, but I just couldn't do it. And maybe you can do that. Maybe you can use, some people do that, and you can use like just a flip phone as a way of avoiding the distractions that the phone has. Tell you a quick story. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
No, you can go first.
Okay. Well, did you lose power? I loved that. I lost power, and I was at home, and I couldn't use my phone, and I couldn't use my computer, and I sat down at my desk, and I had my notebook and a book, and I was like, I can think. And I got like all these ideas down, and I got some writing done, and at the end of the day, my mind was calm, and I had a sense of accomplishment, and I was like, I need to do this more often. I mean, I'm not to lose the power, but like, and so one of the things I sometimes do is I go to my office, and I don't do this for the whole day, but I'll take my laptop and my phone, and I open the bottom drawer, put them in there, and close it, and then sit down with paper and a book, and like just get some ideas, and like my mind, I like free my mind. I feel like, and maybe I'm addicted to the news. Like, I mean, like, so like, you know, with all the Trump stuff today, I was like, oh my gosh, I tend to like follow that stuff. And so, and I don't know, like all of us have something that I think we struggle with. If you don't, then good on you. But I think almost everybody has something that we struggle with. And so this is not the antidote. I don't want to say antidote because these things aren't bad, but it's more like, what is it? It's like the frame that helps me use this properly. It's the tool that helps me channel the power of the internet and of the news and of my iPhone so that it doesn't distract me all the time and like detract from my capacity to work and think. And I was gonna, okay. Oh, you were gonna say something, Matt?
I had a question. I mean, I'll be interested to hear what else you have to say. But I like the story and the idea that, like, you know, definitely struck me like mystery and the unknown. Like, that seems like, yeah, like such a, like, I was thinking of like every story. That's kind of the draw, or what makes a story interesting, or what makes something we want to watch, something we want to watch, maybe. But also, you know, stopped reading in high school, and then picked up again in college because my friend was like, hey, you know, you got to start reading about faith. You got to start learning about it. And so I started reading those kind of books. And I didn't read a fun book until grad school. And then I read Lord of the Rings, and that was super fun, and I couldn't put it down.
Right.
And I read 2 other books. I read like Harry Potter and Narnia, which weren't as good as Lord of the Rings, I thought, but they were both fun.
Right.
But now I'm like, basically, what other book? I tried to pick up another book from the airport, and I was like, you know what? I don't know if I agree with this message, or you know, he's telling me something that I don't quite believe. But so, how do you find good books? And is it worth reading bad books, like bad storybooks?
Short answer is no. I mean, there's some books which are bad, which are worth reading, and just because they're like of the cultural moment. I mean, bad. Like, I don't know. But so here's a couple of sources. John Senior is this guy who taught classical literature at University of Kansas, and he's got the 1,000 Good Books, John Senior's 1,000 Good Books, here. So this is obviously like more than you need, but you know, and he goes by year. So like, obviously you're not 2, and but even the adolescent books, a lot of these are really great books. Emily Bronte, Wilkie Collins, these are great British novels, the Sherlock Holmes stories, all the Jane Austen books, Balzac, Charlotte Bronte. Like, so this is a great list. And you don't have to read just great books. I mean, like, it's good to read good books. Like, that's probably a good book that's worth reading.
I was going to say sometimes, and maybe that's just my personal experience, but sometimes it seems like the great books aren't page turners.
Right, right. So like War and
High
Peace.
School, right?
Yeah.
Animal Farm, and To Kill a Mockingbird. What's that? The
Fahrenheit 451.
Lord of the Flies.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, they're probably great, but like, for me that wouldn't be leisure. Maybe for some people it is.
Right, and I think I would agree with that. So I think these are probably a better list from that perspective. I tried Crime and Punishment. I didn't get through it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So, are you saying enjoyment is the most important standard to judge the books about?
No.
Instead of, like, if they're objectively good, like,
Well, my point was, I mean, read the hard books too, but my point is that's not what I'm recommending. Because the danger there, if you're like focusing on like these really like difficult books, like Dante's Divine Comedy, like that's kind of tough. Like, got to keep looking at the notes. Like, who's this Italian guy from the 1200s? Like, I wouldn't recommend that because that will not make you fall in love with it, right. And then you'll fall out of love, and then you'll stop. So I want us to make it easier on ourselves, and like build up to it. And we have a moral imagination, and we want to shape our moral imagination by good stories. And the good thing is we live in a Judeo-Christian society. Okay, it's sort of falling apart in some ways, but most of the literature has that Judeo-Christian worldview in it. Like the Jane Austen novels of 200 years ago are like so full of virtue and Christian, I mean, not Christian thought, but like the Christian traditions in there. Yeah.
I guess that's kind of what I was wondering. Like, how do you find books like that? Because you definitely seems like it would be good to read. Like, I knew that those 3 series that I read, I was like, okay, these have really good meaning and like messages,
right,
as well as they're really enjoyable, you know.
Right. Like I'm reading right now. This is a book that, well, you could read it if you want to, but it's called She Came to Stay, and it's a novel by Simone de Beauvoir, who was the partner, not wife, of Jean-Paul Sartre, who was an existentialist philosopher, who was an atheist, and he wrote a novel called Nausea, which is about like how the world is meaningless and everything. And I'm reading her story because she's kind of wrestling with the whole existentialist thing. Because I'm going to teach it,
Sure.
but I wouldn't recommend it because it's full of bad ideas. I mean, the story is basically She Came to Stay refers to an open marriage. So like they're not, in fact they're not even married, but they're like a partner. They're a partnership. They're like a boyfriend girlfriend, but they have other sexual partners, and it's like this is horrible. But you know, I'm reading it because I want to critique it. But and you can, I mean, you can read these things, but just be aware that there's like going to be immoral content in them. Yeah.
I had a thought back to what Simon said earlier about like you need discipline to build a habit, and I think especially about reading for leisure in today. Yes, we want to do it for leisure, but also I think you would have to be intentional in setting aside time, especially because we live in a moment of so much instant gratification and just like you get the notification, you get the ping, you get the bullet, you get the headline. Like you don't need to turn the page to see what happened. And I think kind of protecting ourselves from that cadence to really be able to sit down and enjoy a book where you're not going to get everything right away, where you're going to have to wait, kind of like building that delayed gratification and being okay with,
Right.
you know, waiting until the next chapter. I think you do have to be intentional about how do you at least rebuild that capacity, because I think, at least for me, I live with my phone on Do Not Disturb most of the time because I was just getting every notification just like gets me going. So
Right.
I think we do live in a world that is so quick paced that to read for leisure and enjoy it.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Francisco, because I think that's what I was trying to make that point, and you made it better, which is that we cultivate our attention, and this thing and that thing are attention grabbers. And for us to regain control of our attention, we need to build up our attention muscles. And that's why, so it's good, like, let's do 15 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, maybe work up to half an hour a day. And then, like, maybe on a weekend you'll read for 3 hours, like you do sort of like a marathon or something. And that's good. You're training your brain and you're training your attention, and that's going to allow us to use these things with temperance and not be sucked into them. And so that's the goal. And because we can't do without these things, but unless we get them under control, they're going to control us. And so, like the tweet, which you read in like 30 seconds, or the TikTok, which takes a minute, or the YouTube video, which takes 5 minutes, or even watching a movie, which takes like an hour and a half, are not the same as a book, which takes you like 25 hours to read. Like that 25 hours of like cogitating and thinking and contemplating and remembering what you read last week, like that part of your brain is atrophying for all of us right now, unless we keep reading and get these stories into our heads. And so there's the two things. One is the attention, cultivating that attention, which actually, it's going to let us pray better. Think about how hard it is to pray and like sit there in the chapel silent. I mean, part of it's our attention. And like if you read more, it'll be easier for us to pray, actually. And that's another reason I think about religion's kind of like decreasing among a lot of people. People they can't sit and pay attention to like God. And I was going to say something else. Yeah, so let me go to my text here. I wrote something down. And I was looking at a guy named Deresiewicz, and he wrote a book. Did I write it down here? I forget the name of the book. But he's a professor at Yale. He was writing about how students have kind of lost the capacity to contemplate, same thing. And they might be really good students, and they've become masters, and maybe some, have become masters of like doing what we need to get the grade, doing what we need to kind of move on. I can pull the all-nighter, I can get the report done, I can study for the exam. But it's kind of like the Hunger Games, where the adults kind of dress us up and like fight and to the death, and like for nothing, for a meaningless thing, meaning like accomplishment, achievement, a job, like, but sometimes it really can seem really, really meaningless. And so someone called it our generation, and I'm older than you guys, but I'm going to stick myself in your generation, are trained not to be thinkers, but pleasers. Please the professor, please the boss. Don't critique, just go along with what they say. And you can sort of see that like in the universities today, like the students, they haven't learned how to think, and they just get all these protests all over the United States. Like they just, I gotta like show how social justice oriented I am by doing this, and so forth. And so Deresiewicz says this. He says, but it is only through this act of introspection, which I would say comes from reading, of self-examination, of establishing communication between the mind and the heart, the mind and experience, that you become an individual, a unique being, a soul. And that is what it means to develop a self. So he's talking about like, how do I develop my soul, my sense of self? Like the big questions, love, death, family, morality, beauty, what's the meaning of all this? Like books are a crucial way of developing those questions. And many great writers, thank God, have kind of condensed these into these great books. And so we can get a lot of the stories from movies too. I'm a fan of movies, but books are better. I mean, books give us a deeper dive into these things. And so, so I think the books are crucial. And so let me tell you about this event and try to sell you on this thing. So we went to a house in the Woodlands that somebody lent us for free. So we had the house for Saturday and Sunday. We got there at lunch on Saturday, and we finished with a brunch on Saturday and Sunday. And we're going to do this again June 28th to the 30th, end of next month. And someone's letting us a house in the Hill Country. So we'll go there, those of us who want to. It'll cost $100 or whatever, but that'll cover the meals and the housing and the instruction. Basically I'm just getting us to read and discuss it. And I think we're going to do Lord of the Rings since we just barely started it last time. And over the course of 3 days, or like Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday, half a day, my goal is to read in silence. Each person reads for 6 hours. We discuss for 4 hours, and then we just have meals in between.
That's like
Total. So over the course of those 3 days.
No.
No. It's spread out. It's spread out. Yeah, no. It's not all at once. And so you can read more than 6 hours if you want to, but that's what I'll put into the schedule. And this would basically give us kind of a jump start into becoming a habitual reader, and to kind of show us all, and including myself, because I'm doing this because I need this for myself too, to be honest. But I'm convinced that, in a way, we're sort of desperate. And when we did it, we basically, we just read for an hour and a half. We read part of the Lord of the Rings, part of the second book, which is called The Two Towers. I sort of chose a kind of action-packed section, so there would be stuff to talk about. Then we had a whiteboard, and I did a kind of a class, but it was a discussion. And we kind of get into what are the themes here, and also the Christian themes, because we wanted to get into those. And then we stopped. We made dinner, had dinner, continued discussing over dinner. Then we stopped, did a break, did some prayer and stuff. Sat outside with alcohol and tobacco and continued talking. And I think you don't have to do the tobacco thing, but I think it's kind of cool. It's sort of the atmosphere this is a tradition that Tolkien and Lewis and other people like that did. The beer and philosophy concept, it's sort of related to these things. And then we got up in the morning, went to Mass, and then prepared a big brunch, and had our last discussion there. So we'll just have a longer version of that at the end of June. And I think what I would say to that, Simon, is each of us needs to figure out what we love the most. And I think some people are going to love theology, some people are going to love Westerns, war stories, love stories. I love kind of adventure stories where people face death, like the Lord of the Rings is sort of where this, the odds are totally against you. And anyway, and I certainly am a fan of reading philosophy. In a way, Plato's dialogues, they're tough, but he wrote dialogues, which are kind of stories. I think Plato was onto the same idea. A similar idea, where he didn't write point 1, point 2, point 3. He didn't he said, let's have a dialogue between these three guys drinking wine. That's more what I'm talking about. Anyway, but I think read philosophy too. Read Aquinas. Read.
Aquinas.
Or
summary maybe.
Right. Well, I think there's a great summary of Aquinas by Edward Fazer. So yeah, I think a lot of these things it's good to read the summaries from the
50-page summary.
No, I think he's got a 200-page thing.
Okay, I read a 50-page summary.
Okay.
You read one page, you're like, all right, I'm good for the day.
I guess I have a similar kind of point to what he was saying, because I would pick books that I thought were good for me to read, like nonfiction books, fiction books that I thought would be good. I viewed it maybe as an exercise in mental fortitude, and it would work for a period of time. But I don't think I ever cultivated or picked the right book to where it was fun. And then what would happen is either like I stuck with it, and I'd finish the book, and I'd be like, man, like I got like I couldn't tell you what happened in the first 300 pages. It took me
Right,
4 years
yeah.
to read the book. Or it took me like a year to read the book, 3 months to read the book, whatever. I just wouldn't be able to get anything out of it. So what like goes into picking, like whatever it may be, fiction, nonfiction, something that kind of piques your interest?
Well,
You can like love it after you develop this.
it's Tomas, is it?
fortitude. Yes.
I think that I would emphasize looking for your tastes, because like in a way it's a hard thing I'm asking you to do. And so you're going to have to love it. Otherwise it's not going to happen. And so, I mean, think about like working out. I don't know if you guys work out, but like I do like working out. But at first, if you haven't been working out for a long time, it just sucks. It just hurts. But if you do it for a while, you kind of get addicted to it in a good sense. Like, yeah, I really could use a workout right now. And that's what I want you to feel with the book. Now, I think I would encourage you, like, read like a Jane Austen novel, or because like she's let's see here, Moby Dick. That's a great book. That's long though. Yeah, some of these are really long, but Jane Austen, or let's look at the first ones here. If you like In Cold Blood, I mean, you probably won't be bored. Like, there's books which won't bore you because they're like about violent crime, and I think that's a good choice. Great Gatsby, I think that's going to be. You said To Kill a Mockingbird was boring. It's pretty cool, but I think The Lord of the Rings. I mean, like you said, like that you kind of just fall in love with the story and you can't put it down almost. The Hobbit, I think. Those kinds of things I would recommend as well. And, just a defense, not that you were critiquing fantasy, Simon, but because even my English professor colleagues kind of look at The Lord of the Rings and they're like, you're seriously studying The Lord of the Rings? It's like elves and like dwarves and guys with magic rings and stuff. And it's not for everybody, but when I told the story at the beginning about Conrad and how for him to kind of rediscover storytelling, like if you just give him some facts, all they can do is kind of process them. But he needed kind of a mystery and kind of like something he didn't understand, and something kind of magical, like words which like what do these words mean? And like he and now all of a sudden he has to talk about them, and that activates a part of our brain, I think, that you don't get except through story. And I was gonna, should I give you my take on the left and right hemisphere? I don't know if I want to. Okay, what the heck? I started.
Just one quick question.
Sure.
And this can be later on, but it'd be cool to get maybe a short list of page turners that you recommend.
Yeah.
Maybe for some of us who want to get back into reading, maybe that muscle's a little sore,
Yeah.
out of touch, where it's like something to kind of jumpstart us, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
where it's not going to take effort in the beginning.
And
Correct. Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like you're talking about is there a separation between? I always took like theological books and whatnot as like study type material, and you're talking about something like separate in terms of like fun leisure. Not that like those books can't be interesting,
Right.
but like I don't know. Like, is there a separation there? Is there books that like a different mode of reading? Like, I feel like there's books that we are like, okay, I want to learn something.
Well, I think great writers. I don't know if this answers your question, Matt. There are some great writers, and I would say speakers as well, because you can listen to like to podcasts. I think there's a similar thing. I'm a fan of Jordan Peterson or Bishop Barron, and where
They're presenting,
ideas, but
and they can be captivating. They can be like
they're
beautiful.
captivating. Like, and you're like, wow, like you just can't stop listening.
Yeah.
At least I can't.
But I think you did have a point that I I don't have data in front of me, but it is a different muscle when you're reading formative material and things of theology than when you're reading for leisure and just to like pure entertainment. Like I would
Yeah.
imagine it's a different kind of attention that you're engaging.
Well, I agree, Francisco, but I think I would say this. I would say some special writers can kind of do a hybrid thing where they're combining them, where you're like entertained, but you're like getting into deep thought as well. Whether that's like some of the great stories from Lewis or Tolkien. Now, they're not directly theological. Well, some of Lewis's are, and like he's great at that. Lewis is actually very good at kind of giving you a lot of doctrine and kind of theological thought while he's telling you a story. But yeah, I guess for the most part they're separate. But I think there's going to be some overlap. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say John Paul II. It's a hard read. I read his plays are super deep and beautiful, but if you just read them straight through, it's really boring. Yeah. So yeah, most of the time. Although the fact that they're in a story makes them more understandable, probably actually, and I think he did that on purpose. He wrote this play called The Jeweler Shop, which is about marriage, which I would really recommend because it's three, instead of like saying like here's the A, B, C of marriage, the theology of marriage, he has three couples, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. The first couple are a couple who are falling in love and they're about to get married, and you sort of see them happening. The middle couple are a couple who have been married and they're about to get divorced, and it's like, oh my gosh, this marriage is on the rocks, and the woman's about to leave until someone tells her to stop, and you sort of see her thoughts. And then the third couple are the children of the first two couples trying to figure out, should we get married? And they're like, well, should we get married? Like, my parents are not so happy. And the first couple, like, they were married, but then the dad died young, so it's just the mom had to raise them alone. So through those three stories, you get really deep into the issues of like, wow, what is marriage? How does it relate to love? How does it relate to feelings? How does it relate to like ontology and like philosophy? How does it relate to God? So it gets really deep. His whole theology of the body, which is really deep stuff. Yeah. So I mean, I'm certainly a fan of philosophy and studying it and theology. And I think, yeah, I would say that there's going to be, like, there's some great writers who explain the theology of the body way better than John Paul II does because he's, like, super heady and, like, you know, philosophical, but, like, Christopher West or other people are, like, really good at, like, boiling it down to more practical thoughts. So I think look for those types of things as well. Like, if you're going to read Dante, like, I wouldn't just read it. I would. There's actually some great videos, kind of commenting on it. Do like a course or like an online course or something, or do a reading group with beer and philosophy guys. Well, we could do a Dante reading group. I've led one before. I'm a fan of Dante. I mean, his stuff is all about. I mean, it sort of feeds into the theology of the body because, like, he analyzes man as this loving, desiring being, and the people in hell, their desires and loves are like twisted. The people in purgatory are kind of like trying to get their loves in the right direction, and the people in heaven are like loving in the right direction. So that, like, it's just kind of, you see the whole thing played out there.
I would say with, like, I don't know, some, like, the really moving stories, like fiction and nonfiction, like, because of the story moves something in you that the nonfiction typically is, like, touches. Or moves, like, we read theology and that, you know, like, we're in this sort of mindset where being formed, and we read a really impactful story without realizing it, we're being formed in the same way. Which is why it's also important, like, whenever you read bad stories. Because intuitively, we know that we're absorbing something from the story to, like, all parts of ourselves. Right.
Correct. Right. And yeah, I mean, we are getting bad stories all the time, and they're powerfully, like, charged with, like, video and music and stuff that we're getting. So we need to counteract those with good stories. There's another reason to read good stories full of Christian content, because otherwise we're just absorbing all this
That's what I love.
anti-Christian.
Like what Diego was saying, like a list of great books. But
Mhm.
like you know, I feel like right now there's a huge list of like theology
classics.
books and like those that are out there that like a bunch of our friends would like recommend to us, you know. But like the leisure books, I don't have any recommendations.
Yeah.
You said Jane Austen, so
Yeah,
put that down in the
and
Jewish.
this John Senior list, it's not totally page turners, but as you see, like he's aiming at younger people, so they're more page turner-y. So like I would say, his name is Senior, Senior. He came up with 1,000 books, and he has spiritual books as well. But these are great authors: Turgenev, like the Russians, Tolstoy, Thackeray's British. So anyway, but I'll come up with a list. Yeah, thank you for asking for that. How are we doing on
And
time?
if there's some like very easy ones on that list, it's no problem.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, easy's good. I mean,
Yeah.
pleasure is good. I mean, pleasure in reading. Go for it. I mean, like this.
Right.
It's not like, oh, I'm done because I'm enjoying this book. No. This is. Yeah. We want to enjoy. We want to love this. So. So let me finish, because I want to finish by 8:45. Just with some statistics, and maybe we don't even need this, but I found this so fascinating.
Are you able to enlarge that, Paul?
I am. Let me see if I can. Yeah.
Oh.
So this is from a book. I was just at the bookstore today that just came out called The Anxious Generation, and it's cause and effect. I mean, all kinds of people, including like the people in big tech, are criticizing this guy's book because he's showing how clear it is that social media is really harming tons of people, especially young people, but also older people. And you can see it here. Like in these years, 2010, where is it? To 2000, since 2010 to 2020, 145% increase for girls, 161% increase for boys in reporting a strong depressive episode, a major depressive episode, like which points towards clinical depression. College students, you can see anxiety and depression, and the iPhone comes in 2007. I don't know how old you were at that point. I remember the first time I saw an iPhone, I was like, wow, amazing. And then 2009, Facebook buys Instagram. You get the like button, you get the Twitter, you can retweet stuff, and all of a sudden social media just takes off, Snapchat and so forth. And people who were, well, then you have preteens, you have like 10 to 14-year-olds with smartphones, and in theory, you're not allowed to create an Instagram account, but I read something like 40% of preteens in the United States have an Instagram account already, even though it's illegal. Like you just sign in saying I'm 14, and you can create an account. And yeah, so anxiety, depression, ADHD. You can see it by age. Obviously, the youngest people are the most affected by it, but it's affecting everybody. I'm in the 50-plus category, so that's me. And like talking about like, because then you have the people saying like, oh, it's just, they're changing the way we measure these things. No, this is actual hospitalizations. Like this is not made up. This is not just the way this is like people who were like bleeding and they're in the hospital because of this. So 188%. And girls are affected most violently.
That's insane. I mean, the gap between boys and girls.
Yeah, but the thing is, then the boys are affected. In a way, we're lucky. In a way, we're lucky, not girls, but we're affected badly in other ways, where there's like video games, and there's pornography, and there's other things that are harder for boys. Suicides have gotten worse for boys. Boys always commit suicide more than girls. I mean, boys we're just more violent. I mean, men are. So, but yeah, it's going up for boys and girls and so forth. So there's all these.
Wait, what was that one?
This is people adopting these things. So radio. So the smartphone like went up straight. Like it's just going up. Actually, it's not 100%, but the smartphone
The radio.
went up so fast. And I mean,
Talk about addictions.
this thing is a long thing. Should I keep going? Teenage depression. I don't know why he's showing adult unemployment, but adult unemployment goes down. But
Is he saying that like there are like there's less family, or like there's less parents at home?
Oh.
maybe.
As employment went down, depression increased.
Well, it was fun. I was just thinking of that, like,
I don't know.
part of it, but I think ultimately it comes down to the lack of parent-child interaction. And
Yeah.
Both and the worker widget factory worker mindset for both men and women, and that it's bad for either sex group, but especially women, right? Because it's not equal in dignity. So I think that's part of it too, right? Because I feel
The parents aren't interacting as much.
yeah,
Well,
chuck it
and
in the daycare. And
yeah.
I'm like, okay, let me still work as much as possible. And here's the phone. And I see this all the time at, parents, even when they can be interactive, like even shopping. I'll see the kid just playing on the phone,
Right.
at dinner or something. Going around the store, like just beats your child. Like it's crazy.
Right.
know?
No, it's so bad. And I mean, the other thing that's hurting children are that the parents are addicted to their phones. so they're just modeling it, and they're telling the kids, "Oh, you can't use your phone so much," and then and then they're also not interacting with their kids as much because I know because I have my own sort of addiction problems with my phone. So these things are so powerful, and billions of dollars of engineering have gone into these things, and they're making a ton of money. Who are the biggest companies in the world by far? They're in Silicon Valley, and it's because they are harnessing us. I mean, like they've figured us out. I mean, anyway, and these go on and on. Self-harm in the UK, girls obviously like way up.
Wait, what? Oh.
So this is self-harm, like hurting themselves.
But you said obviously in the other one, boys were way up, right? For self-harm.
And suicide. Not self-harm.
So
That was
girls are out in self-harm. but boys are-
self-harm means cutting yourself. Suicide, like taking a gun and killing yourself.
No, yeah, okay. I thought the other graph was all, the one that had the boys higher was also self-harm, but I guess.
No, that was suicide. Yeah, and men are more violent. Men have more access to guns, so men commit suicide. Girls think about suicide more, and so one thing that this guy was saying, Jonathan Haidt, was that now it's like a quarter of girls, teenage girls, have made a suicide plan. Wow. They've already planned it out, and they stopped, or they did it, but most of them stop. But it's basically like a normal thing now. It's like.
And I think also in what year? I think it was 2013. No, 2016, 2017. 13 Reasons Why comes out. We see a clear snapshot. So I was working with children at that point and teenagers. We see a snapshot on optic of buying the suicide things that were used in the show. And so also yes, phones, yes, technology. Yes, glorification of suicide in this massive Netflix show,
Right.
that made suicide this appealing, cool thing. And I'd be curious. He probably doesn't have it, but there is data on the optic of supplies being purchased that were exactly the same things, and suicide or plans attempted and plans written down and attempts of suicide spike. And
Yeah.
suddenly 13 Reasons Why is the most popular show. So it's also the media in general, social media, but also media. I think Netflix has huge responsibility
Yeah.
for portraying a show in that way that made suicide almost enticing. So,
Yeah.
a little rant on 13 Reasons Why.
Yeah, and I've never seen this show, but there's this show Euphoria about these teenage girls who were taking drugs and having sex and everything, and they're and it was this super popular show, and now all the actors are big stars now making all these movies. Our culture is very full of toxic bad stuff. I mean, we have to be very on our guard, and and just aware also, like it's coming into us, even if it's sort of like indirectly, like it's in the air we breathe, unfortunately. So we need to feed ourselves good stories, because like even thinking about like, okay, why should I wait to have sex before? Why should I wait till I get married to have sex? Like most people think like that's absurd. Why would you even like think about that? Like our culture has no thought like the another statistic. There's a book called Cheap Sex, which kind of is a sociology book on like sexual practices. It's made by a Catholic guy. It's not like a bad book, but his argument is that looking at the sexual act from an economic perspective, not in terms of money, but as an exchange between men and women, but also between gays, that like it used to be very pricey, like to access the sex of a woman, like a man who like you have to marry you come back from World War II, like all those men came back from war and they want to have sex and make babies, and they had to get married, and they basically all got married. There was a baby boom like after World War II, and that was just like a given. And like now, the modal, which means in statistics like the most common way that a man and woman are kind of a couple are dating, is that they've had sex. Like you've had sex, that now you're dating. Like that's like the beginning of your dating, not like the end of the dating. It's like, and anyway, it's just, yeah, our culture is pretty bad.
Paul, have you seen the video? The way you describe that book sounds just like this YouTube video called, I think it's The Economics of Sex.
It's, yeah, the same guy made it, yeah.
Okay.
Mark Regner's from the University of Texas,
It's excellent.
the Austin Institute, yeah. Yeah, I would recommend that. We should stop because it's 8:45, but I can show you some more stuff if you want. Should I keep going?
We should probably.
Oh, we can wrap it up.
If people want to kind of hang out, chat.
Okay, this is here if people want to look at it.
Thank you so much, Paul. And
Yeah.
Thanks for the crushes. I recorded this because I'm going to use this